Hello, everybody. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to the professors Paulo Afonso and Ricardo Vasconcelos, who have been so kind to me. I greet all the participants of this conference and I apologize for my absence. I hope to have the opportunity to be with you in San Diego in the future. I would like to talk with you about the navigators as readers of the world, especially about the Portuguese pilot Martin da Costa, who has navigated to the Alta California in 1533, and he described and drawn for the first time the sea lions in St. Thomas Island. But we have no time for that. So my presentation focuses the case of Isabel Barreto and her pilot Pedro Fernandes de Queirós, considering firstly the issue of nationality, and secondly the role of women in the navigation across the Pacific under the Spanish flag. During the first half of the 16th century, in the context of the euphoria of discoveries, Portuguese sailors with experience in Atlantic navigation joined the conquering troops and exploration expeditions in different directions from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The issue of nationality was no more than a legal matter that did not prevent a continuous practice of transgressions. In fact, by establishing the Tordesilhas Agreement to share the world, the Iberian states delimited areas of influence and jurisdiction, but they did not prevent men from circulating everywhere, sailing without any borders or national ties. Although they were considered foreigners, the Portuguese got around the restrictive laws relatively easily. They often concealed their place of birth and nationality. When applying for a license to pass the Indies, they could present a false neighborhood or one acquired by marriage. They married in Spain and acquired the vicinity of their wife, or they settled in a land in Castile for as long as it took to obtain the status of neighbor, taking advantage of homonymy, or they deliberately lied. In fact, here lies an exasperating problem that makes it difficult for us to identify the Portuguese in the Spanish Empire. Not only is it difficult to distinguish between Portuguese and Castilian onomastics, but the spelling itself was identical. To make matters worse, Hispanic sources always recorded Portuguese names as they sounded to the Spanish. In addition, the variety of names used was reduced and the family name was often omitted. This is why the same name could appear at the same time in Mexico and Peru, belonging to a living or dead person, a Portuguese or a Spaniard. In other cases, the same individual was called by different names. Sometimes the navigator himself misleads the authorities with contradictory information. This is the case of Sebastião Rodrigues Sormenho, identified officially as a pilot of the Carrera of Indias and China and neighbor of Mexico City and native of the city of Lagos. In his will, dictated in Mexico City in 1602, he stated that he was born in Sesimbra, but also that he was a native of Lagos, which meant that he had spent some years there where he married, as his wife was a native of the city. In 1587, the privateer Thomas Cavendish sank the Manila galleon Santana, of which Sormenho was the pilot. According to a witness, the galleon pilot was Sormenho, quote, a Portuguese from the Algarve. Confused, clearly he was born in Sesimbra, settled in Lagos, and died in Mexico. At a geographical point of view, the problem is identical. As the majority of Portuguese did not specify their nationality and place of birth or neighborhood, the adoption of the name of the land of origin as a surname could be an indicator of origin, as happened with João Rodrigues Cabrilho. In reality, this is not a reliable identification factor due to geographical homonymy, so it is necessary to cross-reference sources of different kinds. Naturalization was the process most commonly used by non-Spanish vassals of the Catholic monarchy to participate freely in American trade. In 1562, it was ordered that foreigners who had lived in Spain or the Indies for 10 years with a house and root properties and were married to women from the kingdom or the Indies would be considered naturalized. The legal requirements for nationalization were refined by successive decrees along the 16th and 17th century. The Cédula de Naturaleza was nothing more than a document that legally certified that the person born outside Castile had integrated in such a way that he was considered member of its civil community and could therefore enjoy the rights of its natives, especially, as was the case here, the right to take part in voyages of discovery. Anyway, the matter of nationality was never a big problem for skilled Portuguese navigators sailing under the Spanish flag. This was the case of Martim da Costa, Francisco Rodrigues Cabrillo, Sebastião Rodrigues Soromenho, and Pedro Fernandes de Queirós. Anyway, the issue of nationality never stopped the Portuguese from sailing under the Spanish flag. From the 19th century onwards, Spanish historiography appropriates some distinguished Portuguese navigators or omitted their nationality. In addition to Cabrillo and even Soromenho, Isabel Barreto is a case that is still controversial today. Isabel Barreto was a unique navigator of the 16th century about whom many nonsense things have been written and who inspired several novelists of the 21st century, attracted by women who have triumphed in a man's world. Independent, intrepid, for some endowed with a mystical aura, for others fragile in her contradictions, Isabel became the protagonist of a fiction that filled the silence left by the 45 years of her life. Several authors, based on real or false data, have written historical novels about Isabel Barreto. Thus, we see the repetition of the misinformation, such as the mention of Galicia as Isabel's place of birth and burial and her Galician family ancestry. She could not be Galician because she was born in Lima, and she was a daughter of a Portuguese man and had never been in Galicia. That is an unfounded myth. As for Spanish historians, the same mistakes are repeated to this day with a few exceptions. In any case, the dominant tendency is to maintain the errors of the past, and that is why the BBC and TVA carry on with documentaries on Isabel Barreto, calling her the Galician Admiral. In turn, Portuguese historiography ignores this protagonist of the naval history of the modern age. The archive sources for a biographical study of Isabel Barreto do not offer any doubt about her naturalness and ancestry. Her father's will and the information from her nephews, her will and inventory of possessions in the Hercules collection. Isabel Barreto declared her filiation in her will made in the city where she passed away, Castro Virreina, on July 15, 1612. Quote, "Firstly, I declare that I am the legitimate daughter of Nuno Rodrigues Barreto and Dona Mariana de Castro, neighbors of the city of Los Reis, which my parents married me to Álvaro de Mendanha, adelantado of the Solomon Islands." End of quote. For his part, Nuno Rodrigues Barreto, his father, clarified his nativity in his will made in Lima on April 12, 1596, when he was ill. Quote, Let those who see this letter be aware that I, Nuno Rodrigues Barreto, resident of the city of Los Reis del Peru, a native of the island of the said Madeira, I am the legitimate son of Manuel Mendes Pereira and Isabel Gutierrez, deceased, may God have mercy, end of quote. So he was born in Madeira Island. Her mother, Mariana de Castro, could belong to the same extended family through the Borges, if we believe in the reference to the nobility of their maternal grandmother, of her grandchildren Juan de Villegas, Juan Barreto, and Josefa Barreto de Castro. They said that she was a Portuguese lady from Lisbon or Lolé, Algarve, and as it is well known, the Viceroy Francisco de Borja and Aragon was the son of Juan de Borja and Castro and the Portuguese lady Francisca de Aragão, buried in Lolé. The couple Barreto, who enjoyed a preeminent place in the colonial elite in Lima, had 15 children. Isabel was born in 1567 and married 1586 to the adelantado Álvaro de Mendanha, who has arrived in Lima in 1563 in the company of his uncle Lope Garcia de Castro, president of the Lima Audience. 4 years later, Mendanha, discoverer of the Solomon Islands in 1567, the year of Isabel's birth, had signed a capitulation with Philip II in 1574, by which he committed himself to undertake a new expedition to the Solomon's Islands in exchange for merits such as the title of Marquis and the positions of Adelantado, Governor, and Captain General of the Western Island of the South Sea for himself and for the successor he would name. So this wedding was of great importance for the couple. In fact, Isabel's father declared in his will that they had all received much quality and honor in having married the said Adelantado. Mendanha's marriage to Isabel allowed him to receive the capital for the second journey, delayed 21 years, and for her the possibility of participating in an epic voyage. Just as Nuno Rodrigues Barreto, who have obtained encomiendas and social prestige for his participation in the pacification of Peru, and he got close to the Viceroy court, Álvaro Mendanha would also bring honor and glory to Barreto family. Finally, in 1595, Isabel and her family made Mendanha's dream come true. Isabel's dowry, 4,000 ducats, allowed her to buy the galleon St. Isabel, which traveled as an admiralty ship, and 50,000 pesos contributed by his father-in-law were destined to the luggage and provisioning of the fleet. It is very clear that the link was strategic for the Barreto family. 5 brothers participated in this mission. All of them, 3 men and 2 women, embarked on the captain's ship, the galleon San Jerónimo. Lope de Vega, married to Mariana de Castro, Isabel's sister, was appointed captain of the admiralty ship. The account of the Portuguese navigator Pedro Fernandes de Queirós, chief pilot of the expedition in which Isabel stood out as a leader, focuses on the maritime space of 3,600 kilometers between Lima and Manila, and on the 317 days spent mostly on board the galleon San Jerónimo. Queirós, a navigator from Évora, wrote a detailed account narrating the conflicts on board, the storms and anger during the voyage from Callao to Manila, the cruelties allegedly committed by the Barretos brothers, the conciliatory and submissive character of Mendaña and the alleged despotism of Isabel Barreto, the Queen of Saba. From his point of view, we can imagine what happened after the death of the Adelantado Mendaña in Santa Cruz Island, and we can follow with some perplexity the leadership of Isabel, the first woman in command of a galleon. However, we have to compare it with all the testimonies of some survivors. They left the coast of Peru on June 1595. The fleet of 4 ships with more than 378 people, including men of war and seamen and settlers, sailed for 3 months in a northwesterly direction to the island of Santa Cruz, between the New Hebrides and the Solomon Island in Melanesia, where they arrived on September 7, very close to the Solomon Islands, but they did not know it. Until November 18, what happened in the Graciosa Bay of Santa Cruz Island on land and at sea was a story of confrontation, conflict, pain, and death. On October 17, Mendaña was very ill in his bed with malaria, so he dictated a will that he could hardly sign. The following day, he passed away. He named his brother-in-law, Lourenço Barreto, as Captain General of the entire fleet. From the reading of his will, it is clear that he complied with the clauses of the Assento of 1574 that granted him the mercy of naming any successor he wanted. So he decided to name his wife as governor, his universal inheritor, and he granted also her the title of Marquisate. In that moment of glory for Isabel, the general mood was very weak. Her brother Lourenço, named Captain General, was also very sick and died 15 days after Mendaña. After his death, Isabel became the highest authority in the South Sea. So, from November 2 until her arrival in Manila on February 11, these women, aged 28, accumulated the position of Captain General, Governor of the Western Islands, discovered in this expedition, in addition to the title of Marquise. However, it was not Mendaña's decision to grant Isabel the leadership of the expedition. This happened because, after the death of her brother, there was no other legitimate authority on board other than her, and that was her big chance. The account of Pedro Fernandes de Queirós allows us to know the life on board and the odyssey that was the long and dangerous voyage of 20,000 leagues that, for the first time, connected Peru with Philippines. The author presented himself as a participating narrator. This quality, in a way, may affect his selection of facts and the interpretation of Isabel Barreto's behavior, which, as a woman in a masculine universe, generated great controversy. The picture we have of her leadership results from the vision of the Portuguese pilot, of course. Considering that the prevailing morality was based on the subordination of women to men, the pilot's comments on Isabel's decisions deserve some caution. We have to listen to different statements collected in Manila. Anyway, it is clear that Isabel was faced with the unexpected leadership of the fleet, followed by her brothers Diego and Luis and her sister Mariana. She also may had the tacit support of Queirós, who tried to calm the moods of the more exalted. On November 17, Isabel would have gathered the council of pilots and captains of the 3 remaining ships, and she asked everyone's opinion about her decision to leave Santa Cruz. In fact, her determination was to head for Manila and bring priests and people to populate and finish the discovery. If it is true, this had been the governor's first formal act of command. The way in which the major pilot reports this act allows us to evaluate the leadership capacity of Isabel, a woman with no sailing experience whatsoever. Faced with imminent chaos and the impossibility of her carry on with the discovery, she persuaded everyone of the justice of her purpose and the only way to survive. On the way to Manila, 3 ships were lost, leaving only the galleon San Jerónimo. Faced with sickness, hunger, and thirst, during this hard and uncertain crossing, Isabel was accused of despotism. She refused to share food and water, arguing that she had invested heavily in this expedition. The madness was total. In an inclement sea with a wrecked ship and mutinous personnel, Isabel acted shamelessly, perhaps because she felt that being a woman governor in a male-dominated world required obedience by fear. Isabel pretended despotism and supposed avarice can be understood in the light of her social condition. Sharing a small space on a ship for 3 months with people of low stature, approaching the sick and hungry when she could isolate herself in her chamber to wash, pray, sleep well, and eat with her family, was more appropriate to her condition, of course. On the other hand, this detachment, which can be deduced from her reactions to the interpellation of the major pilot, was justified by the need to assert her leadership in a man's world. Actually, she turned out to be right. If it had not been for her strong determination in heading for Manila without wasting time, after the long stopover in Santa Cruz Island, everyone would have been lost. What is certain is that her leadership, combined with the skill of the pilot, saved the galleon San Jerónimo with 100 people and achieved the extraordinary goal of crossing the Pacific Ocean from Manila as the wife of the Adelantado and from Santa Cruz to Manila as the first and only women admiral of a sea expedition. The Portuguese pilot recorded in his diary this sentence that he could have said to a distracted sailor. Look, quote, look that we have brought this ship from so far and remote lands and parts by a route never sailed before. End of quote. It was true. After almost a year of tormented voyage, the galleon finally arrived in Cavite, Manila, on February 11, 1596, where the survivors have been received in triumph, especially Isabel, by the preeminent local authorities. They had all come from the city to see the ship from Peru, which, it was told, brought on board the Queen of Saba from the Solomon Islands. A few months later, Isabel Barreto married in Manila with Don Fernando de Castro, the general of the Acapulco ship, nephew of the governor, and left to Mexico, passing by California, in the same galleon and driven by the same Portuguese pilot. Later, they settled in Castrovirreyna, Peru. Queirós continued his voyages to the South Sea until his death in Panama in 1615. His nephews, such as the cartographer Lucas Queirós, stayed in Lima for a long time, as well as the nephews of Isabel Barreto. This is a brief account of the adventure of the lusodescendent Isabel Barreto in the South Sea between 1595 and 1596. Concluding, we can sustain with no doubt that she was born in Lima, daughter of an important Portuguese conqueror and the Comendero, Pizarro's companion. Her high position in the command of a Spanish fleet is unique. In fact, the second expedition to the Solomon Island has been a symbolic achievement for Barreto's family. All of them managed very well their life just like Isabel with the new husband in Mexico and Peru. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Maybe we can meet together sometime in San Diego.